In the sweltering heat of August 1945, across the islands of Japan, millions gathered around crackling radios and dimly lit homes in crowded streets, the air thick with the scent of tatami mats and simmering miso. The emperor's voice, frail and ethereal, broke through the static for the first time in history, announcing the unimaginable surrender. Temples fell silent, factories halted their rhythmic hum, and the once unyielding spirit of a nation cracked under the weight of atomic fire and relentless invasion. Smoke from distant ruins lingered in the sky, a grim veil over cities reduced to ash, where the echoes of air raid sirens still haunted the night. Families clutched faded photographs of sons lost in far-flung battles, their whispers of disbelief mingling with the distant wail of trains carrying the wounded. This was not the end of a war, but the collapse of an empire that had risen from feudal shadows to dominate Asia, only to dissolve in flames. Yet, to understand this rupture, we must journey back to the misty harbors of the 19th century, where the first tremors of change arrived on black ships from across the sea. The year was 1853, and the tranquil bays of Edo stirred with unease as Commodore Matthew Perry's steam-powered vessels pierced Japan's centuries-old isolation. The shogun's court, cloaked in silken tradition, faced the thunder of foreign cannons, their acrid smoke signaling the end of the Tokugawa era's fragile peace. Whispers spread through lantern-lit tea-houses and samurai quarters, where the clink of swords mixed with the rustle of scrolls, debating loyalty and reform. By 1868, the Meiji Restoration erupted like a suppressed volcano, overthrowing the shogunate in a whirlwind of civil strife, the Boshin War-esque gunfire echoing across snow-dusted mountains and blood-soaked fields. Emperor Meiji ascended, his gaze fixed on the west, vowing to forge a nation of iron and steam. Feudal domains dissolved into prefectures, the air filled with the clamor of construction as railroads snaked through rice paddies and factories belched coal smoke into clear skies. Samurai sheathed their blades, trading armor for Western suits, while scholars devoured books on industry and governance. But beneath this frenzy of progress, old resentments simmered in the shadows of cherry blossoms, hinting at fractures yet to come. As the Meiji era unfolded, Japan's transformation accelerated with the precision of a well-oiled machine. The 1889 Constitution, modeled on Prussian ideals, established a diet where voices debated in echoing halls, the scent of incense from imperial shrines underscoring the emperor's divine sovereignty. Economic veins pulsed with new life. The yen stabilized markets. Zaibatsu conglomerates like Mitsui and Mitsubishi rose like colossal guardians, their warehouses brimming with silk exports and imported machinery. Shipyards hummed day and night, forging a navy that rivaled Europe's, while armies drilled in crisp uniforms, the thud of boots on parade grounds a symphony of discipline. Telegraph wires crisscrossed the land, carrying news of innovations from electric lights illuminating Tokyo's Ginza to compulsory education, filling classrooms with eager youth, reciting foreign languages. Yet, in rural villages, farmers bent over fields under the same relentless sun, their calloused hands sowing seeds of continuity amid upheaval. The air carried the aroma of fermenting soy and the distant whistle of steam engines, a blend of tradition and ambition that propelled Japan toward greatness, unaware of the perils lurking in unchecked expansion. Victories came swiftly, etching Japan's name into the annals of power. In 1894, the First Sino-Japanese War ignited over Korea, battleships clashing in roiling seas off the Yalu River, the crack of rifles piercing the fog as Qing forces crumbled. The Treaty of Shimonoseki ceded Taiwan and influence in the peninsula, the metallic tang of gunpowder lingering as Japanese troops marched through conquered streets lined with silent onlookers. A decade later, the Russo War of 1904 shattered expectations. The siege of Port Arthur filled the air with the roar of artillery and the cries of the wounded, culminating in the Baltic Fleet's annihilation at Tsushima, waves churning with debris. Portsmouth's peace granted southern Sakhalin and Korean dominance, annexing the kingdom in 1910 amid protests muffled by colonial administration. World War I saw Japan seize German holdings in Shandong and the Pacific, the quiet occupation of islands where palm fronds rustled under new flags. These triumphs swelled the empire's borders, resources flowing like rivers to fuel factories. But the seeds of overreach were sown in the soil of ambition, quiet warnings ignored in the euphoria of conquest. By the early 20th century, Daily life in Imperial Japan wove a tapestry of old and new, where the clatter of wooden geta on cobblestone streets mingled with the honk of automobiles in bustling cities like Tokyo and Osaka. Mornings began with the aroma of grilled fish and steaming rice, families kneeling on tatami floors for breakfast under paper lanterns, while schoolchildren in uniforms hurried to classes, echoing with lessons on loyalty and progress. Factories buzzed with the whir of looms and the sparks of welders, workers in overalls toiling under the watchful eyes of foremen. Their sweat-soaked brows testament to the nation's industrial heartbeat. In rural hamlets, the rhythm of harvest continued, farmers in conical hats threshing rice amid the chirp of cicadas, festivals lighting nights with bonfires and taiko drums, urban evenings unfolded in geisha houses with the strum of shamisen, or in cinemas flickering with silent films, the air scented with cherry tobacco from pipes. Yet, beneath this veneer of harmony, social hierarchies persisted. The Burakuman's quiet exclusion, women's roles confined to hearth and obedience, creating invisible fissures in the societal foundation, harbingers of strains to come. The Taisho era dawned in 1912 with promises of democracy, parliamentary debates filling the Diet's chambers with heated arguments, the rustle of newspapers like the Asahi Shimbun spreading ideas of universal suffrage. Crowds gathered in parks for speeches, the air alive with a scent of blooming azaleas and the murmur of reform. Economic booms post-World War I filled ports with cargo ships laden with exports, prosperity trickling into households through rising wages and modern amenities like radios crackling with Western music. But the Izuarsan Great Kanto earthquake shattered disillusioned flames, devouring wooden structures, screams piercing the dust-choked air as over 100,000 perished. Rebuilding efforts straining resources. Vigilante mobs targeted Koreans in the chaos, revealing undercurrents of xenophobia. As the 1920s waned, global depression crept in like a fog, factories falling silent, unemployment lines snaking through rainy streets, farmers facing famine amid plummeting rice prices. The collapse did not begin with chaos. It began quietly, in the empty bellies and growing discontent that militarists would soon exploit. In the shadows of economic despair, ultranationalists whispered promises of revival, their secret societies meeting in dimly lit rooms, heavy with incense and conspiracy. The 1930s saw assassinations echo through the corridors of power. Prime Minister Hamaguchi shot in a train station, the metallic scent of blood mixing with steam. Inokai Tsuyoshi slain in his residence, amid the clatter of intruders' boots. The February 26th incident of 1936 erupted in Tokyo's snow-covered streets. Rebel soldiers storming government buildings, gunfire cracking the winter silence as they demanded a return to imperial purity. Though suppressed, it tilted the balance toward military dominance. The Imperial Rule Assistance Association, forming in 1942, unified the nation under authoritarian control. Rallies thundering with chants and waving flags. Economic policies shifted to war preparation. Rationing whispers spreading through markets as resources funneled to arsenals. But no one understood what was coming next. Quiet mobilization masking the storm brewing on the horizon. The invasion of Manchuria in 1931 unfolded with deceptive calm. The Mukden incidents, staged explosion, shattering the night. Japanese troops advancing through dusty plains under the guise of protection. Manchukuo rose as a puppet state. Pui installed as emperor in opulent halls, echoing with hollow ceremonies, while railways hummed with extracted coal and iron feeding Japan's furnaces. The League of Nations' condemnation rang hollow in Geneva's chambers. Japan withdrawing in 1933 amid diplomatic isolation. The air in Tokyo thick with defiant speeches. Early warning signs multiplied border clashes with the Soviets at Köln-Gol in 1939. The thunder of tanks and artillery in Mongolian steppes ending in stalemate. A neutrality pact signed in uneasy silence. Domestically, propaganda films flickered in theaters, stirring patriotism, while censorship muffled dissenting voices in newspaper offices. The empire expanded incrementally, each step building tension like a tightening spring, unseen by those immersed in daily routines. By 1937, the Second Sino-Japanese War ignited at the Marco Polo Bridge, gunfire exchanging in the humid Beijing night, escalating into full-scale conflict. Japanese forces swept southward, capturing Shanghai in brutal street fights, where the acrid smoke of grenades choked alleyways, civilians fleeing amid the wail of sirens. Nanjing fell in December, the air heavy with the stench of decay as the massacre unfolded, rivers running red. Screams echoing through looted streets, an estimated 200,000 lives extinguished in weeks of horror. Atrocities mounted in occupied territories, comfort stations shrouded in silence, forced labor camps ringing with the clink of chains. Back home, newsreels glorified advances, but ration cards appeared in kitchens. Fabric shortages, mending clothes. The war bogged down into stalemate, draining resources like blood from a wound. Yet leaders pressed on, blinded by visions of Asian hegemony, ignoring the gathering clouds of international condemnation. As the 1940s approached, key decisions sealed the empire's fate. The tripartite pact with Germany and Italy in 1940 signed in Berlin's grand halls amid clicking heels and salutes, binding Japan to the Axis in a web of mutual aggression. Oil embargoes from the United States a bid deep, storage tanks emptying in naval bases. Descent of fuel rationed to essential vehicles. Debates raged in Tokyo's war rooms, maps strewn across tables lit by dim lamps, where Admiral Yamamoto warned of awakening a sleeping giant, yet expansion southward beckoned with promises of rubber and oil from Dutch East Indies. The decision to strike Pearl Harbor crystallized in secrecy, plans drawn under guarded roofs, the air tense with anticipation. By the time the signs became clear, it was already too late, the path to total war irreversible. Hubris, overriding caution in the pursuit of dominance. December 7th, 1941, dawned with deceptive peace over Hawaii, but in the pre-dawn hours, carrier decks buzzed with the roar of engines as planes lifted into the sky, heading for battleships moored in tranquil waters. Explosions shattered the morning calm, torpedoes slicing through waves. The air filled with the thunder of bombs and the screams of sailors amid billowing smoke. Initial triumphs followed Singapore's fall in 1942. British forces marching into captivity through humid jungles. The Philippines conquered, Manila's streets echoing with victory parades. The greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere proclaimed liberation, but occupation brought requisitioned rice and forced conscription. Resentment simmering in colonial villages. Japanese cities celebrated with lanterns and newspapers blaring headlines of invincibility. Yet, beneath the jubilation, supply lines stretched thin across vast oceans, vulnerable to unseen threats lurking below the surface. The tide turned at Midway in June 1942, carrier fleets clashing in the vast Pacific, dive bombers screaming from clouds to ignite decks and fiery infernos. The sea churning with sinking hulls and oil slicks. Guadalcanal's jungles became graveyards, malaria-ridden soldiers slogging through mud under relentless artillery, the crack of rifles blending with tropical downpours. Island by island, Allies advanced, Tirawa's beaches stained red, Iwo Jima's black sands echoing with bunker blasts, Okinawa's caves hiding desperate defenders amid civilian suicides, homefront cracks widened air raids, droning overhead, blackout curtains drawn in fear, children drilling with bamboo spears in schoolyards. Factories shifted to war production, the clang of metal day and night, but shortages gnawed at morale. Soup lines forming in rainy alleys, where whispers of defeat circulated like ghosts. Firebombings ravaged the homeland in 1945. B-29s, unleashing infernos. On Tokyo, winds whipping flames through wooden neighborhoods. The night sky glowing orange as over 100,000 perished in choking smoke and collapsing structures. Submarine blockades, strangled imports, markets barren of fish and vegetables. Families scavenging roots in barren fields, under the pall of hunger. The system faltered, black markets thriving in shadowy warehouses. Desertions whispered in barracks. Propaganda posters peeling from walls. Military leaders clung to illusions of final victory. Kamikaze pilots launching from airstrips with the scent of cherry blossoms. But exhaustion permeated every level, the once mighty machine grinding to a halt amid mounting casualties and isolation. The ultimate rupture came in August. Hiroshima, enveloped in a blinding flash on the 6th, the mushroom cloud rising like a specter, buildings vaporized in searing heat, survivors stumbling through irradiated ruins with blistered skin and silent screams. Nagasaki followed on the 9th, another cataclysm amid the hum of daily life, tens of thousands incinerated in moments, the air thick with fallout and despair. Soviet tanks rolled into Manchuria, crushing defenses in dusty plains. the thunder of artillery sealing the in imperial chambers. Debates raged through sleepless nights, the emperor's decision breaking the deadlock amid the hush of advisors. Surrender broadcast on the 15th, streets falling into stunned quiet, flags lowered from poles as occupation forces approached. The empire's grand edifice crumbling into history's dust. Human consequences unfolded in waves of anguish, widows in black kimonos, queuing for aid in rubble-strewn Cetus orphans wandering train stations amid the clatter of repatriation. Posts returning gaunt from jungle camps, social breakdown manifested in black market brawls and suicides from dishonor. The air heavy with the scent of incense at makeshift memorials. Families shattered by conscription and bombings. Communities fractured by collaboration accusations. The once rigid hierarchy dissolving in chaos. Overseas, colonial subjects revolted, Koreans dismantling Japanese symbols in Seoul's streets. Chinese reclaiming factories amid jubilant crowds. The collapse rippled through generations, scars etched in survivors. Talese whispered around hibachi fires, a society forced to confront its hubris amid the silence of defeat. Under Allied occupation, led by General MacArthur in Tokyo's requisitioned buildings, the air buzzed with typewriters drafting reforms, the scent of American cigarettes mingling with Japanese tea. The 1947 Constitution stripped the emperor of divinity, renouncing war in Article 9. Parliamentary democracy taking root in election halls filled with hopeful voters. War crimes trials in somber courtrooms sentenced leaders like Tojo. Echoes of testimony revealing atrocities' depths. Economic revival began with land reforms breaking Zaibatsu monopolies. Fields redistributed to farmers under spring rains. Industries rebuilt with U.S. aid. The hum of machinery returning to factories. By 1952, sovereignty restored via the San Francisco Treaty. Japan emerged as a pacifist powerhouse, exports flooding global markets, but the empire's shadow lingered in disputed territories like the long-term impact reshaped Asia independence movements ignited in Indonesia and Vietnam. Colonial maps redrawn amid gunfire and negotiations. The scent of freedom mixed with bloodshed. Japan's economic miracle transformed ruins into skyscrapers. Bullet trains whistling through landscapes once scarred by war. A model of resilience studied worldwide. Yet, the foe influenced global orders, the United Nations born from ashes. Cold War alliances forging intense conferences. Nuclear shadows deterring future aggressions. Cultural shifts permeated manga depicting wartime horrors. Museums preserving artifacts amid reflective silences. A nation grappling with memory in schoolrooms, echoing with history lessons. In the quiet aftermath, the rise and fall of Imperial Japan stands as a testament to ambition's double edge, where modernizations like cast long shadows of destruction. From feudal harbors to atomic craters, the process unfolded not in singular cataclysms, but in accumulated choices, each step echoing through time. As cherry blossoms fall in annual cycles, so do empires, their legacies whispering warnings in the wind, reminders that no dominion endures forever, and the seeds of collapse often sprout in the soil of triumph.